I'll open up by asking, how many of you in this room think that you're quite clever? And we can be modest here. I'm going to put my hand up. So we are clever people. Let's admit to it. And sometimes we do clever things. So I'm going to talk through that. So for me, the curiosity about this whole concept came to me when I was at primary school. And yes, when I was at primary school, we had black and white photographs. I know some of you are going to laugh about that as well. And the wake-up call for me that's kept me fascinated for years and years was when a bunch of kids did something really silly and got into trouble, and the other bunch, I was one of the good ones of course, said to the teacher, "I can't believe they are so stupid." And I'll never forget the teacher who said, "They are not stupid, Lena, they just did something silly." So I had to separate the person from the action. And since then I've been on this ongoing journey to try and work out why that happens. So let's explore that together. How many of you have, in a frenzy, bidded for something on eBay that maybe is now in your cupboard gathering dust? Chased your losses at the casino despite the fact that your logical brain tells you that the house has the advantage? Some of us. Or just had a little hissy fit from time to time. And yet we're logical and we're clever, right? So let's find out why, because it does happen. So the reason it happens is because our brain has to go into survival mode when we experience threats. So it was a survival tactic for years and years and years when we lived as hunter-gatherer, and a lot of you that have been to my presentations before will know I always go back to the primal roots, is that we needed to make quick decisions to survive. Now, those quick decisions can trip us up in today's society that's increasingly complex and different layers and challenges that we didn't experience for tens of thousands of years in our primal past. And we just need to be aware of those tripping hazards. So let's have a look at some of those and why. So in the hunting and gathering days, as soon as we were posed with threat, we reacted, and that's called the fight or flight response. And we all experience that. I experienced it when I came on stage, but I knew that I couldn't run away, so I had to fight and stay here. I couldn't flight, if that makes sense. So we needed that to stay alive. We needed those quick decisions, and we had to very quickly size up a situation and make that decision very quickly. And I put that up there, and I often ask people, how much DNA do you think that we share with our primal cousins? And the answer is actually more than 97%. So it's no surprise that the primal part of the brain that kicks in when we're under threat is going to overtake and is quite prevalent. So like it or not, we are very, very closely related to our primate cousins. So 97% upwards, depending on which species. And the other interesting thing is that 90% of what we know about our own brain we've only discovered in the last 5 to 7 years. So we're finding out more and more all the time, and we're starting to have a better understanding of our primal response. And in fact, now some neuroscientists call this eavesdropping on the brain. It's the next best thing to mind reading. So what happens is with scanning now, which is called fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, and I've been pulled up for mentioning fMRI in the past and not explaining what it does. What it does is it scans our brain in real time and can actually show what's going on in the brain when you are introduced to certain threats or introduced to certain images. So that's why it's now eavesdropping on the brain. So let's see that happen to us. What I'll ask you to do is take 1 or 2 minutes to yourself or with the person next to you to say the colour, not the word. Okay, so just spend 1 or 2 minutes. You can do this internally, you can process this internally, or do it with the person next to you, say the colour, not the word. So I hear a giggle or two. Okay, so somewhere in there I introduced mild threat. Yeah? I changed the game. I went from comfort zone to something that your brain doesn't usually do. So If we had an fMRI on all your brains when that was happening, we probably would have registered some neural activity that suggested threat. And threat is when something is pushed out of your comfort zone. So that was mild threat. What happens when someone experiences high threat? That's when you can have the hissy fit and the tough things can start to happen. And some of you that might have read my Yammer posts in the last week, I sent out a teaser that explained a story about what happened with a CEO in the States. So August last year, a CEO in a large organisation that I'll reveal in a moment was in a meeting with 1,000 of his staff. And he said to one of his staff members, "Put that camera down." And the staff member just kept taking photos. And he said to the staff member, "Get out of here, you're fired." So he had the total hissy fit in front of 1,000 people. He did actually fire that employee. It was on the news. It was in a lot of HR bulletins. A week later, the same CEO sends an email to all staff apologising for his emotional mistake. So what happened there was a high threat situation pushed this person out of their comfort zone, and there might have been other mitigating factors because this is all variable and it's an individual response, and he lost it in front of his staff. Now, I'll just explain what happens behind the scenes and then I'll talk to you about who it was. I would never put this up on a screen. I wouldn't put his name up on a screen, by the way, but I can tell you. When the brain goes into this state of threat, I want you to think of the energy in our brain as a finite resource, okay? Just a fixed pie. And when you go into threat, all your energy will go over here to protect the threat mode, to protect yourself. So anything over here, which is your logical brain, has lost the energy. So the rational thinking goes down, your logical brain goes down, you'll keep gambling, you'll keep bidding on eBay, or you'll have your hissy fit over here because all the energy here is feeding that survival part of the brain. Does that make sense? And so when that's drained, you need to probably be able to recognise that quite quickly, because this is, once you're in this zone, bad mistakes, poor decision making, impaired decision making. It was Tim Armstrong, CEO of AOL. And if you Google him and his incident, or Tim's tantrum as it's sometimes called on the Google internet, you will find a little bit more about what happened there. Okay, have a think about what this says. I hear ice cream is good. Okay, what if I told you it said this? Now, my guess is you think ice cream is good because you have a memory of certain letters and how they look, and you're anchoring. You're doing what we call emotional tagging. You're using your information from the past to try and make sense of the present. We had to do that. Our primal ancestors had to do that to make quick decisions. If that bison killed one of my tribe last week, my God, it might come for me this week, so I better do something to protect myself. So I'm tagging to a previous experience and previous knowledge, okay? What happens, though, if we tag to something incorrect? Cyclone Katrina. The guy head of the emergency response team in America was a Vietnam War vet, and he'd been used to previous alarms being false alarms. So when the early alarm came out for Cyclone Katrina, he ignored it because he thought, that's just an early alarm. She'll be right. Everything that happened in my war vet days wasn't an issue. Cyclone Katrina was quite tragic. So he emotionally tagged his decision based on previous experience, which tripped him up. So there's the tripping hazard. So something to be mindful of. And we all know gossip works on this so well. If I don't know half the information, most of us will go around the water cooler and make it up. And gossip is a survival mechanism as well, because we needed to talk and tell each other stories to survive. And if we couldn't make sense of it, we would just fill the gaps as we went. But ice cream is good, so let's go on. The other time that we can make some really bad decisions is when we think we're going to lose or let go, because loss aversion is a primal fear. So if we think we're going to lose something, and this is very, very pertinent to change management and how we build our change management strategies, is to focus on the gain and not the loss, because loss aversion is something that is primal and it can drive a lot of bad decisions. And one of those examples is when I chase my losses in the casino. So it's really a losing cycle if you think about the house advantage. And I know enough about stats to know it's at the end of the day I'm not really going to win a lot long term. You keep playing because you don't want to lose. And sometimes project managers will chase a project that's not working particularly well because of the sunk cost, and that's a decision-making science around loss aversion. We don't like to lose, so we will fight to not lose. We will go into threat when we think we're losing, and that's when our decision-making is impaired again. So as I'm going through and explaining this, think about a time when maybe your decision-making has been impaired. And think about if it was one of these situations that was prevalent when that happened to you. If I had more time, and I'm probably coming to the end of my time, if I had more time, we could also explore some more of the unconscious biases we have, because really these are unconscious biases that are in the primal hardwiring of our brain. There's other unconscious biases. For example, how quickly do we size someone up, friend or foe? We had to do that in our tribal days because if someone was an enemy, it was a threat to the whole tribe. It was a threat to survival. Now that primal registering in the first 90 seconds when we meet someone, friend or foe, is happening, and it impairs our decision about whether maybe we employ someone or whether we even like somebody. And we might not want to admit it, but we do it. We like people who are like ourselves, first and foremost, primal. So it's being aware of that unconscious bias. So what? Now what? Okay? So we know we've got a lot of primal relationships with our primate cousins, 97% plus DNA. We know we have the hardwiring in our brain that can trip us up with decision making. So the thing is there to recognise when it's happening, recognising when you're starting to feel those emotions of threat, and when you think that you could be going into this zone of irrational decision making. So the answer there is try and pause and label it. Okay, psychologists call this labeling. It's stopping and thinking, okay, I'm feeling like this. There's a reason I'm feeling like this. I better not react. How many of you have thought I should have slept on that? Yeah? How many have thought, OMG, why did I do that or say that? A night's sleep would have been so useful. Or going on a walk around the block would have been very helpful, yeah? So once you label it, you're on the path to kind of probably minimising it. And this is the emotional intelligence piece now, the self-awareness. Understand when it's happening to you. Because you can't really stop it happening, it's primal. But the area that you have control over is recognising it. And as I come to the conclusion of my short presentation, I will leave you with a parable about decision making to think about. And that parable is about the two wolves. And the Cherokee grandfather says to his grandson, there are two wolves within us all. One is the bad wolf who does evil things and takes over and just does things that no one really likes and very, very evil. And then there's the good wolf. And the good wolf is, good-hearted and full of good spirit and very, very kind and gentle. And they fight each other all the time. And the grandson says, grandfather, which one wins? And grandfather says, grandson, it's the one you feed. So I'll leave you with that thought and think about which energy you're going to feed or potentially try and walk away from or be aware from next time you make decisions. And hopefully decision making will be less impaired for you once you recognise that primal response.